Welcome back to Globewise Entertainment, where we dive deep into the forgotten corners of cinema history. Today's journey takes us back to 1966, a year when horror wasn't polished, budgets were low, but imagination was absolutely wild. These are the films critics ignored, studios barely promoted, but fans of cult cinema still talk about today. From gothic vampires to sci-fi terror and bizarre crossover nightmares, this list proves one thing: sometimes madness creates masterpieces. Let's begin. The Plague of the Zombies delivers one of the most unsettling versions of horror from the 1960s, not through flashy monsters, but through slow, suffocating dread. The story takes place in a quiet Cornish village where a mysterious illness begins spreading, killing locals under strange and unexplained circumstances. A concerned doctor and his daughter start investigating, only to discover something far more disturbing than a natural disease. The dead are not staying dead. Under the influence of a dark and unknown force, corpses are being brought back to life, but not as mindless creatures of rage. Instead, they move slowly, obediently, almost mechanically, as if controlled by an unseen hand. What makes the film terrifying is its atmosphere. Fog-covered graveyards, empty streets at night, and silent zombie movements create a sense of helpless inevitability. These aren't fast or aggressive zombies. They are controlled, patient, and unstoppable. The film also stands out for its social undertones, subtly reflecting themes of exploitation and control hidden beneath its horror surface. At the time, it was overshadowed by bigger productions, but today it is regarded as one of the most influential early zombie films in cinema history. It proves that true horror doesn't always scream. Sometimes it quietly takes over everything. In The Reptile, horror takes a slow, creeping form that feels more like a curse than a creature feature. Set in a quiet English village, the story follows a young couple who move into a remote house after the mysterious death of the husband's brother. What begins as a peaceful new life quickly turns into paranoia as strange deaths start spreading across the village. Locals refuse to speak, shadows feel alive, and a hidden truth begins to surface: a deadly illness tied to a terrifying family secret. Beneath the calm surface lies a horrifying transformation that strikes at night, turning human beings into something cold, scaled, and inhuman. The film builds tension through atmosphere rather than action. Fog-filled streets, dim candlelight interiors, and slow reveals create a constant sense of dread. Instead of jump scares, it relies on silence and mystery, making every moment feel uncertain. At release, it was overshadowed by bigger horror titles, but today it's appreciated as a classic example of British Gothic horror at its most unsettling and atmospheric. Chamber of Horrors is a twisted blend of crime thriller and Gothic horror that feels like a dark carnival of fear. The story follows a deranged killer who escapes execution after multiple brutal murders, only to return under a new identity, continuing his deadly obsession while evading justice. Set in a shadowy, almost theatrical version of London, the film plays with fear through suspense rather than supernatural elements. What makes it chilling is not monsters or curses, but the psychology of the killer himself, calm on the surface, yet deeply disturbed underneath. The film also experiments with early crime gadget horror, introducing strange tools and devices used by the protagonist to manipulate and trap victims. These elements give it a slightly comic book-like tone, but the violence and tension remain unsettling. At the time, it was marketed as a sensational horror experience, but audiences were unsure how to categorize it. Was it crime drama or horror? That confusion hurt its reception. Today, Chamber of Horrors is remembered as a strange but fascinating hybrid, a film that sits between classic Gothic terror and modern slasher-style storytelling. Rasputin the Mad Monk dives into one of history's most controversial figures and transforms him into a larger-than-life horror presence. Starring Christopher Lee in a commanding performance, the film explores Rasputin not just as a mystic healer, but as a manipulative and dangerous force inside the Russian royal court. The story follows Rasputin's rise to power, where he uses hypnotic influence, psychological control, and dark charisma to dominate those around him. His presence corrupts everything he touches, pulling noble families into chaos while masking his intentions behind religious mysticism and charm. What makes the film stand out is its tone, part historical drama, part supernatural horror. Rasputin is portrayed almost like a villainous sorcerer, blurring the line between man and monster. The performances are intense, and the atmosphere grows darker as his influence spreads. Though historically inaccurate, the film thrives as gothic horror entertainment, showing how one man's obsession with power can feel more terrifying than any fictional creature. In Queen of Blood, sci-fi horror takes a cold and alien turn, blending space exploration with something deeply unnatural. The story begins when a mysterious alien signal is detected from deep space, leading humanity to send a rescue mission to a distant planet. But instead of finding survivors, the crew discovers a silent, glowing extraterrestrial being, a beautiful yet unsettling woman-like creature. She is brought back aboard the spaceship for study, but from the moment she arrives, something feels wrong. One by one, the crew begins to disappear under unexplained circumstances. The alien entity doesn't attack like a monster. She seduces, manipulates, and drains life with an eerie calmness that makes her even more terrifying. What makes the film powerful is its atmosphere. Cold corridors, glowing control panels, and empty silence in space amplify the feeling of isolation. It's less about action and more about psychological dread in deep space. Though low-budget and heavily re-edited from its original version, Queen of Blood has earned cult status for its haunting visuals and early influence on space horror cinema. Destination Inner Space takes a different route into sci-fi horror, this time diving beneath the ocean instead of into space. Set in an underwater research facility, the story follows a team of scientists studying the deep sea when they encounter a mysterious alien object resting on the ocean floor. What begins as scientific curiosity quickly turns into survival horror when the object reveals itself to be something alive, something not meant to be disturbed. Soon, strange incidents begin occurring inside the underwater base. Equipment fails, communication breaks down, and crew members start behaving unpredictably. The tension rises as the scientists realize they are trapped far below the surface with an unknown life form that adapts, evolves, and infiltrates their environment. The underwater setting creates a claustrophobic nightmare where escape is impossible and help is too far away. Despite its limited budget and modest effects, the film captures a strong sense of isolation and paranoia. It reflects 1960s fears of the unknown, not in space, but in the unexplored depths of Earth itself. Today, it's remembered as a hidden gem of underwater sci-fi horror that helped shape later deep-sea thriller concepts. This film is exactly what the title promises, and somehow even stranger than it sounds. Jesse James Meets Frankenstein's Daughter throws a legendary Wild West outlaw into a gothic horror experiment involving mad science, hidden laboratories, and unnatural creation. The story follows Jesse James and his companion as they arrive in a small town where mysterious experiments are taking place. They soon discover that a woman, claiming to be the granddaughter of Frankenstein's legacy, is conducting horrifying experiments to create a monstrous servant using electricity and reanimated tissue. What unfolds is a surreal mix of Western shootouts and mad scientist horror. Gunfights clash with laboratory experiments, and outlaw justice collides with unnatural creation. The tone constantly shifts between serious and bizarre, creating a strange viewing experience that feels almost dreamlike. Despite its low budget and uneven storytelling, the film has become a cult curiosity because of its sheer boldness. It represents a time when filmmakers weren't afraid to mix genres in the most unexpected ways. Today, it's remembered not for perfection, but for its fearless imagination and pure exploitation-era creativity. Now imagine one of the most bizarre crossover ideas ever filmed, a Western outlaw facing off against one of horror's most iconic vampires. Billy the Kid vs. Dracula takes this strange concept and turns it into a low-budget cult curiosity that defies logic but somehow entertains through sheer absurdity. The story follows Dracula, who travels to the American West and targets a young woman for his dark obsession. Standing in his way is Billy the Kid, a notorious outlaw who suddenly becomes the unlikely hero. What follows is a clash between gunslinging Western chaos and gothic vampire horror, filmed with minimal budget but maximum ambition. The production is rough, the pacing uneven, and the effects extremely dated even for its time. Yet that's exactly why it survives in cult memory today. It represents an era when filmmakers weren't afraid to experiment wildly, even if the result was unintentionally hilarious. It's not just a film, it's a piece of cinematic madness that proves anything was possible in 1960s exploitation cinema. This isn't a traditional horror film, but it carries a darker kind of fear, human chaos. The Wild Angels throws us into the brutal world of outlaw motorcycle gangs, where violence, rebellion, and emotional destruction rule every frame. The story follows a biker gang led by a cold, unpredictable leader whose life spirals after a stolen motorcycle incident leads to tragedy. What begins as rebellion quickly turns into grief, rage, and psychological breakdown. Peter Fonda delivers a raw, unsettling performance that captures the emptiness behind the freedom these characters chase. The film feels chaotic, almost documentary-like, with loud engines, aggressive confrontations, and no moral safety net for the audience. Instead of monsters or ghosts, the horror here is real human behavior pushed to its extreme. At the time of release, it shocked audiences and divided critics, but today it stands as an early blueprint for outlaw cinema and counterculture storytelling. From cursed villages to cosmic nightmares, from outlaw experiments to ancient vampires, these 1966 cult horrors prove one thing: cinema doesn't need perfection to become unforgettable. Sometimes, the strangest films are the ones that stay with us forever. Which of these forgotten horrors shocked you the most? And should we uncover more hidden cult movies in Part 2? See you in the next dive into the dark side of cinema.